Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 689 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to talk about everything that happened over the last week in NXT and over the last 2 weeks in AEW. But not only that, some major breaking news went down earlier Thursday as WWE and TNA Wrestling entered into an official partnership. We will have a conversation about that and a bonus surprise for you as well. Vintage Chris Vanini will be joining the show. He missed our WWE episode on Tuesday, but he has plenty to say coming off of Raw and SmackDown. So we'll take a quick second look at some of that. We'll talk WWE X TNA. We'll cover NXT and 2 weeks of AEW. What will not be part of the show and was originally scheduled to be part of the show was our full breakdown of New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom and Wrestle Dynasty back-to-back shows at the beginning of this month. We're going to hold it one more week between watching 8 hours of AEW, 2 hours of NXT, and all this additional stuff happening. I figured, look, I don't have the time to watch all of it, and the show would be way too long. We'd also have to delay it until Friday. So we're going to do that next week for New Japan. I promise you we will hit it. Quick breakdowns of some of the important matches and storylines. With all of that said, getting into today's show off the top, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about the fire.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. I also wanted to let everyone know that we are serious about juicing up our YouTube channel. You can find us over there at Getting Overcast. You can also just search Getting Over Wrestling Podcast YouTube, and you will certainly find us in search. We have just started uploading a bunch of clips from our old interviews. First one is up with L.A. Knight. Yeah. And we will have 3 or 4 more clips from that interview along with everyone. You know, Becky Lynch, Trick Williams, Roxanne Perez. Interviews we've done that the Silver King has taped on video. We will upload clips of all of them. And then going forward in 2025, our new interviews, we will post them in their totality. We'll do some clips, sure, but we'll also post them in their totality after they air right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. So again, subscribe on YouTube at Getting Overcast. You also search Getting Over Wrestling Podcast on YouTube. You will find us. Our podcast episodes get posted there, audio only as well. We're over 500 followers. We keep gaining, which is fantastic. Getting all those naturally. We need to hit 1,000. That way we can join their creator fund or whatever they call it. It allows us to put links on videos, get ad revenue, all that important stuff. So if you want more video of Getting Over in the future, including potentially taped episodes, live instant analysis, all that type of stuff, please go ahead and subscribe at Getting Overcast on YouTube. Also just search Getting Over Wrestling Podcast YouTube. We would greatly appreciate it. So let's welcome in Vintage Chris Vanini. He won't be here for the entire show, but he did finally get to watch SmackDown and Raw coming off of a busy week at a coaches convention. I know you're also traveling, Chris, to the College Football Playoff National Championship. I've been to plenty of them, so I'm not so much jealous about you going to the game. I am jealous about you going to Atlanta, which is one of my favorite cities, but it is I don't want to say a world tour, a Southern tour for you right now here in these United States. How are things going?
I'm good. And don't feel too jealous because I'm not actually going to the game.
You're not?
We're doing some podcast stuff around the media day and then after the game and stuff like that.
Okay.
The Athletic is sending a lot of people to this game. But
Gotcha. Well, I will say, I do love the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the press box there. It is great. I mean, it's way better. I'm going to the Super Bowl, so I'm going to get to go to the Mercedes-Benz Superdome with, candidly, one of the worst press boxes in all of sports, but especially professional sports. It's absolutely horrendous. But I was really more talking about just being in Atlanta, which I absolutely love. Great food, great people. The traffic's terrible, but everything else about it I like.
Yeah, actually, I think the last 2 years, maybe, I recorded the meaties from the hotel at the
That sounds
national
right.
championship.
Yeah.
But because now there's a 12-team playoff, the championship got pushed back. So
Yeah. I remember one of the years you had to find a room and it was like a whole to do.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was out in the hallway and people kept trying to figure out what I was doing. But yeah, no, I wanted to jump on. Just an awkward 2 weeks. We're almost at the end of the college football season.
Yes.
and
I
then
know.
and then that will stop interfering. Although I will be at the Royal Rumble 2 weeks after that. So
Oh
a
man.
lot going on this week.
Royal Rumble. We got WrestleMania coming up, obviously, in a couple months. Super Bowl for the Silver King. Maybe some WWE stuff happening around the Super Bowl, which I can't fully talk about. But we have a lot to discuss in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. Let's circle back real quick, talk about SmackDown and Raw from this last week. I know you have some notes that you wanted to share. I'll ask you this off the top. Did you, like I, find Raw immensely more enjoyable this week compared to a week ago, the debut on Netflix?
Much better than the debut episode of Raw. Much better than the 3-hour SmackDown, which felt like it was drawn out for the sake of just stretching.
Yep.
Which was not great. But yeah, 2.5 hours might be the ultimate sweet spot, as it turns out, for a show. So that was interesting. And it was not like, whoa, the show's over. Like, you never know when it's going to end. That makes it more interesting. Yeah, definitely better in week 2. Nice to not have that Fortnite logo in the middle of the ring. So that was a positive as well.
Did you get a chance to listen to Tuesday's show by any
I did.
Let me say that again. I was going to say by any chance. Did you get a chance to listen to Tuesday's show?
I did.
So what was interesting about that 2.5 hour runtime it was only like a 5-minute reduction in content. The additional time that was cut off the show was all commercial breaks. And it is astounding how much more complete that show felt at 2.5 hours with fewer commercials than going 3 hours with the additional commercials. You would think, well, more time watching, more content, even if it's only 5 minutes, that you come away thinking that you got more out of your time, but you absolutely did not. Getting a 2.5 hour show, or 2:33 is what it went. Let's say they go 2:35 or even 2:40 with that amount of content and just cutting down those commercials a little bit, spacing out the breaks a little bit differently. It made all the difference in the world.
Yes. And I didn't watch Raw live, so this was my first experience watching it on Netflix as a replay. And while it does have the Netflix style ads that pop up with like the timer in the corner, you can fast forward through those. So that made it helpful too.
So you have Netflix with ads though. You don't have the ad free plan.
Correct.
So on my replay, the ad breaks were completely gone. I have the 4K plan with no ads, but the fact that you can fast forward, it almost doesn't matter. The only thing that sucks about Netflix is it doesn't have that like scrub feature on the bottom where you can see the content as you progress. So you have to kind of guess, 2.5 minutes. Okay. It's probably the end of the commercial break.
Yeah. That's why I like rewatching it on YouTube TV actually, because it's easier to jump through and you can see where you're at. But little things, but no, it was an easy experience and that's good.
What are your thoughts about the content that we got across SmackDown and Raw? Anything you want to point out in particular?
I think this is an absolutely crazy loaded Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
We're going to have that I'm excited to be at, with Roman and Cena and Punk and Rollins and Drew, like already. Like sometimes you're like, I don't want to know anybody who's going to be in it. I just want it to be all surprises. But telling us this many big names are going to be in it right off the bat gets me a lot more excited.
Well, what's great is they're not surprises. These are all people who are actively competing in the company, right? So what I don't want them to do is give away potential returns, or if someone special comes in, if like Rob Van Dam shows up, don't have him come out on the Go Home Raw. Like make that a legitimate surprise.
Yeah. So that'll be exciting. Gable versus Penta, the perfect way to start in terms of who to wrestle and what to do. And I think they did a really good job of making Penta feel like a big deal. However, I would have structured it as Gable comes out, cuts a promo of like, I can take any lucha on, I'm better than everybody. Just heel it up in front of the crowd a little bit and then do the Penta debut. Like that's how WWE used to do it. That's how John Cena debuted. That's how Taz debuted. I was thinking about that one. Kurt Angle cutting a promo in the ring. Here comes Taz. Instead, he just comes out and then there's another one. And if you haven't been paying attention, you have to listen to commentary tell you. I'd rather have Gable tell you.
That's
like,
fair. They did do that segment backstage the week prior, which is probably why they didn't repeat it, but they could have. They easily could have.
Yeah, just 30-second promo, crowd boos. Then when Penta comes, it's an even bigger cheer. But he looked great. He was awesome. I loved him most in Lucha Underground back in the day. I think he was like Pentagon Jr. back at that time. Or I know he's kind of changed names back and forth. But that storyline with him and Vampiro in Lucha Underground was incredible. Like that was the period where I was watching Lucha.
By the way,
a little bit.
He fought Chelsea Green and Io Sky in one-on-one matches in Lucha Underground.
How about that?
And they're fantastic. Both of them are great.
Yeah.
And you can find them. I never watched Lucha Underground like live when it was happening. I really wish I did in retrospect because it's made for me. I found an archive of all the episodes. I don't know when I'm going to have time to do it. Definitely after the Super Bowl. At some point in 2025, I think I'm going to watch all of Lucha Underground.
Yeah, it was. They apparently did not treat the wrestlers very well in hindsight, but
Not surprising.
as a television show,
yeah,
it was really exciting and just different, man. It was totally different. And Pentagon Jr. felt like one of the stars from that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Ricochet was, Prince Puma as well. It's really cool stuff. The women's intercontinental title might be a top 3, top 4 looking championship in WWE.
Beautiful. Yeah,
already. Like that's how it should look. It's amazing. The white stripes just look better. Rhea's belt, Rhea's women's world heavyweight championship belt, the women's IC belt looks great. I'm also really glad that Cole mentioned during the lead up to the match that China had won the men's intercontinental championship because that was a huge moment. Like that was a very, very big deal when that happened. So I'm really glad China got that shout out. That was great. And my last thought on Raw, I wrote, hey now, for Nia Jax coming out in that tiger bodysuit or whatever it was.
Oh, that's what you're into?
I just thought she looked fantastic. A lot better than she did on SmackDown for whatever reason. She looked good.
They look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
And what about SmackDown? Any thoughts on that?
It kind of felt like a filler, discussions lead to tag team matches, lead to Cody wrestled. It was fine. It would have been nice to have LA Knight and Nakamura back involved in there.
Sure.
LA Knight pushing Fatu out the door was pretty hilarious. That was great. I was surprised on the show your reaction to Lillian Garcia's LA Knight thing. Like I wouldn't have noticed it, I don't think, if I hadn't already listened to the show.
Are you surprised that I noticed it or that I didn't like it?
One, that you noticed it, and two, that you had such a visceral reaction to it. I was just like,
it's not her job. It's not her job. It is the job of the fans to react to the announce.
I just thought it was like, oh, that's weird. Like,
imagine if back in the day they'd say this contest scheduled for 1 fall, and then the announcer himself said 1 fall. No, the crowd does that. You're taking their gimmick away from them.
I didn't know the background to it, so you explaining that was helpful.
Yeah,
but I was surprised how upset you were.
I
don't think it should continue, nor do I think it probably will. But anyway,
well, it's one of those stupid things that bother me, just like the cylindrical Raw mic flags. I mean, those are just they're atrocious looking. Why would you do it? They didn't change them for SmackDown. They didn't change them for NXT. It looks worse. You can't see the entire logo. It's a lose. They look tiny in the wrestler's hands. So yeah, Lillian, just stop doing it. She's better than that. She doesn't need it.
As you said, it's very funny seeing your television shot on WWE television via the Triple H tweet. Surprised it. I don't know. Maybe there's a rights issue. I don't know. They still use the clip. And then lastly, the bet you and I made about John Cena. Your decision to have the loser.
Do you accept it?
Do John Cena's theme.
Yes.
I accept, but I think it should be basic thugonomics rather than you can't see me.
I'm okay with dealer's choice on that. We'll take a vote. How about we let the fans decide? So whoever loses after it happens, we will allow the listeners to choose which song we rap.
Okay.
Because you're right, both are good. I'm trying to think, do I know?
I mean, you could also do Bad Bad Man. That's a banger from John Cena.
No, I want it to be one of the entrances, though. Let's leave it up to the listeners to decide. I'm totally fine with that. I would have to learn the lyrics to Basic Thugonomics. I mean, I think I know the hook, but I don't know the lyrics. I already know The Time Is Now, so that's a little bit easier. I actually think Basic Thugonomics might be easier to rap than The Time Is Now, but either way, the fans will decide. Are you cool with that?
Sounds good.
All right. There was a big news item that happened Thursday morning, went down Thursday morning, was announced Thursday morning. WWE and TNA Wrestling are jointly entering into a multi-year partnership, as you need to do jointly, based on the idea of sharing talent between NXT and TNA, both for television and premium live events / pay-per-views. Now, this had already been happening, obviously, but it was more of a toe in the water, like trial run, with TNA getting some big names like Jordan Grace and Joe Hendry on NXT, while TNA wound up with some decent names, but also utilized a bunch of mid-card and lower talent, still growing throughout developmental on their shows and their pay-per-views. Now, TNA business was up big time over the latter half of 2024, now into early 2025, so this is clearly working for them. Hendry's appearance in NXT was one of the most viral moments for WWE the entire year, and Grace's work with Roxanne Perez and others was awesome. Now, it's expected that she will debut full-time with WWE later this month or early February at the Royal Rumble, perhaps arriving on the main roster in that match for the second straight year. TNA has since announced, after this came out, that there will be some type of NXT involvement in TNA Genesis this coming Sunday. There have not been ongoing storylines, but I'll just tell you this, with Trick Williams recently wondering what's next for him, I'm wondering whether he might show up there. It wouldn't make too much sense because Trick is a top 2 male name in NXT right now, but we have talked on this podcast ad nauseum about him needing to work on his in-ring, and TNA has far more experienced male talent, and working with all those guys would be great for him. As for WWE, where it benefits is basically using TNA as a double-A system, just to use a baseball term. It can poach the best talent, like Jordan. It can also have TNA be a second stop for developmental wrestlers between NXT, which is AAA, and Evolve, which seems to be happening this year and would operate as single A. It makes a lot of sense, just given everything WWE is doing right now with the NIL space, recruiting college athletes, and with WWEID recruiting independent talents. They could even push independent talent to directly sign with TNA, which is what they used to do with Evolve. It's really hard to see a negative for either company right now. It's quite a momentous day for WWE to link with another American wrestling promotion in this type of formal manner, particularly in such an official capacity where they make a press release about it, which was something that ECW never even achieved back in the day. So I think I've laid this out somewhat nicely overall, Chris. What are your thoughts on WWE and TNA coming to this agreement and announcing it in this fashion?
I kept thinking about how not even that long ago, like WWE personnel were not allowed to say TNA or acknowledge its existence. Like for the vast majority of the history of TNA, even think about the early days of TNA when the New Age Outlaws were there and the stuff that they would say about Vince back in the day and just how the many iterations of TNA and where it's been. But yeah, to get that press release in my email and see the WWE and TNA logos next to each other was kind of wild. So
I legitimately, let me say this. When I got the email, I thought they bought TNA. Like I saw it, I saw WWE TNA, I go, oh wow, they actually went all the way with it. So I was shocked when it was literally a partnership.
Yeah, to me, it's nothing but upside because it's essentially just with NXT, in which case you're just getting new experiences for your wrestlers. What was the criticism of NXT in the last several years of WWE as they went away from independent wrestlers? Oh, they're teaching them all to wrestle the same and they're all in the same stale environment. They're not learning new things by getting new experiences. Well, this is that. And it's good. And it gets those younger talents who just kind of try different things and learn different things and expose them to new audiences and vice versa. And if there's people in TNA who work out really well, then WWE's got an in and a great relationship to make it happen. Or even if they kind of like somebody, but don't want to sign them exclusively to a deal, just loan him over.
Mhm.
You know, like that's what the territories used to be back in the day. So I think it's a easy layup for all parties involved.
It's a farm system in baseball. You see it with NBA and the G League. I mean, it just makes all the sense in the world for what WWE is trying to do from a talent development standpoint. And TNA, back in the day, I'd say they probably would have been too proud to accept something like this and say, oh, well, our talent's only good enough for NXT. These days, with the change in leadership and everything that's going on there, they are realizing that WWE can only help them. They are seeing it in the dollars and cents on their bottom line. Ratings are up. Attendance is up, pay-per-view buys are up, and they're booking some venues that they haven't booked in years. So talk about mutually beneficial. I would also guess, and this is a pure assumption, I have not seen any contracts. I don't have any information on this. I would guess there's probably something in the contract where if WWE doesn't think this is working out or there's any type of issue that arises, they can probably just pull the plug and get out of it because really they're the ones taking the risk. TNA isn't taking any risk. They couldn't necessarily go lower than they were. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It just seems to be a huge W for both of them. And it's pretty interesting that it's coming right now.
I think back to Mickie James in the Rumble with the TNA belt, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
I can't believe that's
Jordan
happening.
Grace also last year.
Well, and then a different year. Then you jump ahead.
Right.
Jordan Grace shows up. I wasn't familiar with her, and you're like, "Who the hell is this?" And a whole lot of people are like, "Whoa, who is this?" I want to see more of her. I'm gonna go watch TNA to see Jordan Grace.
Totally,
and it helps TNA. Like it's a win-win. It's awesome.
It is, and you know what? That's pretty much it for me right now with you. Talk to some WWE. Any last thoughts, Chris, before you get out of here?
No, I'm just the Rumble snuck up on me. I can't believe we're just a couple weeks away from this already. The fact that college football is going longer into January is kind of shortening the window between that and WWE events. So yeah, I won't be on next week's WWE show because of national championship stuff, but then we'll be right back into Rumble preview and hopefully can get some reaction of what it's like being there when I get to the Rumble.
Yeah, and to clarify, national championship literally happening the same time as Raw Monday night.
You know what? Also, by the way, that Raw on the 20th, the next Raw, it's in Dallas. It's here.
Oh.
And I would have gone, but I can't because I'm going to the national championship game. So that was kind of annoying.
That does suck. Also, though, I think this Raw, I'm not going to say that they're mailing it in necessarily. I know for a fact the January 27th Raw is going to be a major show with some big developments. So I don't know that you're missing that newsworthy of a Raw. I'd rather be at the national championship. In this case, even not going to the game, just being in Atlanta, you're probably going to benefit from that. We will see, depending what happens on Raw and SmackDown, depending how much you're able to watch. Perhaps we will do this again next Thursday with you. But if not, then we will definitely have you for all the build up to the Royal Rumble and going forward. And I think everyone appreciates, Chris, that you were able to take this time for your special appearance on the Thursday show.
Good to be here.
Now that the Silver King is back riding solo, allow me to remind you to follow us on Twitter @GettingOvercast and Blue Sky @GettingOver for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can send in questions and comments for the show. We will try our best to get them on air. We actually had a couple new submissions for The Last Word and some comments that we will be including on our next WWE episode already. So again, hit us up on social media @GettingOvercast on Twitter, @GettingOver on Blue Sky. You can also email us, by the way, gettingoverpod@gmail.com. And I would be remiss not to remind you that on this show,
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. You can get it at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. 2 more major segments remaining on this show. First, a full breakdown of NXT from this week, and then a complete breakdown of AEW from the last 2 weeks. And an absolute ton happened in AEW. Those 8 hours, I don't want to say they were action-packed, suggesting that it was only wrestling, but there were a lot of things that happened on those shows. There are timestamps in the episode description, so you can bounce around from NXT to AEW if you only want to hear analysis of one or the other. But as always, I hope you listen to the remainder of the show in its totality. Starting with NXT, something that did not happen on screen. Charlotte Flair was backstage dressed to the nines on Tuesday in a dress that did not leave much to the imagination. This left me assuming that she's been training, getting back into ring shape, which of course is a fair assumption given her return is imminent, as we have been reporting on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Let's go ahead and talk about what happened on the show. Obafemi opened having arrived as NXT champion. He used let's call it white American voice to make fun of wrestlers who say they didn't think they could notch such a big win like this, before claiming it was always his destiny to rule NXT. And for anyone who does not know, Obafemi is putting on his Nigerian accent. He is legitimately Nigerian. He moved to the United States for, I believe, the end of high school and then college, and he lost a lot of his accent. So he actually speaks with a somewhat American accent. So he puts on the Nigerian part of this. So when he kind of broke into that voice, it was kind of like an amalgamation of like him doing a white voice, his normal voice, and then switching, of course, code switching from the Nigerian voice that he uses on television. Anyway, Femi acknowledged Trick Williams' reign, but he said he always had a limited ceiling. Then he called Eddie Thorpe a rat and a cockroach. Tony D'Angelo interrupted, obviously having claim to an eventual title shot because he beat Oba twice. Out came Ridge Holland, taunting Tony over the Santa Claus attack. That led to a brawl. Thorpe then blindsided Femi and delivered a strap-covered elbow to the back of the head. Femi's promo was on point. D'Angelo confronting was logical. The rest of it was a shrug. These 4+ Trick Williams and Ethan Page being the entire upper card for the men's division, it is a dire situation, and we've stated that numerous times here. Oba ideally would have had a top challenger confront him right away to build for Vengeance Day. Hell, even someone from the main roster coming down just because he was at Raw on Monday night showing off his title. Instead, it's just a continuation with Thorpe. And don't get me wrong, Thorpe is more interesting now than he was a month ago, but you want to talk about ceilings? He's got a major ceiling at this point. Femi later barged into Ava's office, demanding to give Thorpe a title shot if he wants one, just so he can get hands on him. Ava argued, saying people can't just be handing out title shots. Robert Stone tried to talk sense into Oba, saying Eddie was playing him like a fiddle. So Femi jacked them up against the wall, with Stone selling it with his signature screams and stuff. Ava relented. She agreed to the match next week. She is such a damn pushover as a GM. All you have to do is like slightly argue back at her. You get whatever you want. By the way, Thorpe did deserve a title shot. Femi beat his ass before his scheduled match last week. So why the resistance to giving this guy an opportunity? That didn't make any sense. Thorpe later cut a social media promo saying Oba took the bait again, just like last time. It's so easy and predictable to get at him. He also shouted out Ava for making the match despite all of their bullshit in the past. Thorpe promised to overthrow the ruler next week, and it was probably his best promo in NXT. He came across like a real person and not a canned character like he has before. I'm glad they're getting this one-on-one out of the way, off of pay-per-view or a premium live event, and just doing it on TV. There was an extended video package about Julia winning the women's championship last week. She said gaining the title was important because it's the ticket to a whole new set of challenges and experiences for her. Disappointed not to get more from her on this episode. It seemed to be an Oba-focused episode. Hopefully next week is a Julia-focused episode. Roxanne Perez entered for the main event to address her future. She was speaking like a babyface, putting over her title reigns and saying her goal was to make women's wrestling special and turn the NXT division into main eventers, as proven by all the free agents that they have signed recently. She congratulated Julia, saying it's sad that's what the fans ultimately wanted, and then she turned heel on a dime, saying Julia has no chance to keep the division on top without her. Roxy said NXT and the fans don't deserve her, and while the old NXT needed the 4 horsewomen, this generation only needed one. Out of nowhere, Bayley suddenly entered to a massive, and I mean massive, surprise pop. Role model flying across the country in 24 hours just to do this. She was in San Jose on Monday night. Bayley said Perez is at a crossroads and needs to adapt to her situation. Roxy immediately cut her off, saying she's been asking for advice since she was 14, and while Bayley believes in her, the division will be fine without her. Perez bragged about breaking her records and outshining her, which led to Bayley saying she's stuck in NXT while Bayley beats Tiffany Stratton and goes to WrestleMania. That led to a slap and a takedown, with NXT cutting off because the show went too long. Now, we'll obviously have to see what becomes of this. My presumption was that we get Bayley and Roxy at Vengeance Day. We'll come back to that. Credit to Bayley for going SmackDown, Raw, NXT in Orlando across the country, and then back to SmackDown this coming Friday for a title match, all in an 8-day span. This is a hopeful indication that Roxy is not going anywhere, either now or in the future. So as not to be a broken record, I'll just simply say she's nowhere near ready for the main roster from a character and promo standpoint. The wrestling is probably better than half of the main roster right now. The rest of the package needs to be improved. She will get there. She just needs more time. Bayley was a fantastic surprise, and Roxy did hold her own in the promo battle. It's going to be interesting to see how this further develops next week and beyond. I could definitely see Roxy costing Bayley her title match against Tiffany Stratton, only for them to feud in NXT, whether at Vengeance Day, in a big TV main event, or hell, maybe they can even stretch to Stand and Deliver, but that is a long way off. It's going to be tough to build a storyline like this for 3 months, so it does feel like it's something that happens between now and Vengeance Day, which is about 4 weeks away. We had Stephanie Vaquer against Shotzi in what I guess you could call a North American Championship #1 contendership match. The booking here that I absolutely ran through on last week's show, it was clarified at the bell. So you'll remember all the criticisms about Vaquer winning the #1 contendership and then Shotzi pinning Fallon Henley in a tag team match on the same show, wanting to be #1 contender and get the title shot, and Ava just saying, it's okay, you guys can fight it out, even though Vaquer literally won a #1 contendership on the same program. Well, it was clarified that Vaquer is the rightful #1 contender, but the match would determine which wrestler gets the first shot at Henley. Still not a fan of the way it was done. At least it was addressed. Solid back and forth action early with some smart counters. Vaquer did a dragon screw off the ropes plus her thigh driller. Shotzi delivered a double underhook German suplex for an unexpected 2.9. JC Jane randomly interrupted, only to get double headbutted by the combatants. That was a distraction for Henley to drill Vaquer in her back with the title, allowing Shotzi to roll her up with leverage and get the win. So let's get this straight, okay? What Henley accomplished here was solidifying another #1 contender for the title. We were told Vaquer is going to retain her #1 contendership before the match even started. So rather than simply dispatching of Stephanie next week, Fallon decided to ensure Shotzi gets a shot, which she only half deserved given the tag team victory last week. That is not logical. Furthermore, yeah, Shotzi had leverage, but can we really not get more creative with a pinning combination here? Especially if the goal is to protect Stephanie, who took her first loss in this situation. Small package, schoolboy, jackknife cover. Can we do something a little bit more believable? There was an interesting production choice by WWE after this was over. During a picture-in-picture commercial break, we saw Vaquer hunt down Jane in a makeup chair, grab her out of it, shove her up against the wall with a forearm right to her throat. Then she confronted a few other wrestlers, presumably asking where Henley was located. She even got in Page's face, Ethan Page, before his match. But we never actually got resolution to all of this on television or on social media. I would have liked a little bit more to that end. By the way, if you're wondering whether Booker T on commentary enjoyed this match, let me just play you a clip of his reaction while Vaquer was doing her thigh driller to Shotzi's head.
So unapologetic. Well, I saw it, and I certainly know that you're going to see this. You don't even have to have your glasses.
What was this guy doing at the commentary booth while this match was ongoing? Holy shit. Speaking of Ethan Page, he entered the men's locker room with his ego overflowing coming off of last week's support from The Rock. Dante Chen stood up to him as Page talked shit about taking out Javon Evans. That quickly led to a match between them. Page attacked from behind before the bell. He easily won a squash with his new cutter. Then he trapped Chen's leg behind the steel steps and snapped his ankle against the ring post. Really nice sell by Chen. Page kind of did like the emotionless catatonic type of gimmick. Javon ran down for an attack. He got immediately neutralized with a single punch to the jaw. That led to him bleeding again from the mouth. Not the strongest setup. Top-notch execution by Page during the in-ring portion. I loved seeing Evans be that vulnerable selling this as a legitimate injury that he needs to overcome, as opposed to something from which he could just bounce back and grit through. That doesn't happen too frequently in wrestling, and I think this is being played perfectly. Sol Ruca was consoling Kalani Jordan backstage, telling her not to change amid her losing streak, but Zarya disagreed, saying she's been losing so much that she needs to turn the tide and use her losses as motivation. Cora Jade came in talking shit, saying she would win a title before Lonnie gets another one. Cora called her the same little girl from Michigan State, only to get a pretty weak slap for it, with Lonnie saying, "I'm not the same girl." I mean, she is, but the story that they've been telling is that she's trying not to be, so I guess it plays. The aggression just felt so forced from Lonnie. There's a believability aspect for her that just has to get improved, and I don't know how to do that because I'm not in the business, but maybe it's acting classes. I really believe she needs acting classes. So we had Jordan against Jade. It's really tough to say you're not the same gymnast from Michigan State when your entrance includes you clapping with chalk in your hands like a gymnast from Michigan State. Lonnie went wild, throwing haymakers at Cora, which created an opening for Cora as the referee had to hold Lonnie back. Jade raked her eyes in that moment and then hit her double underhook DDT for the win. It was a lackluster finish for a passionate match, though the wrestling itself wasn't particularly solid from the onset. If this leads to Jordan actually changing her character rather than just suggesting that her character is changing, that's going to be a positive. Cora needed a notable win just given her string of losses, and beating a former women's North American champion, that is a positive. Masha Slamovich, who beat Jordan Grace for the TNA Knockouts Championship, she was in attendance for the show watching from the crowd. Cora eyed her a bit after the bell. Mickie James was also in attendance, but she was backstage the whole time. She never made it to TV. NXT did post a social media video of Shawn Michaels meeting Masha backstage and kind of saying, "Hey, you're welcome here anytime." That was basically the gist of it. DIY randomly appeared backstage saying they were there to watch Fraxium, given people say they're the greatest tag team in NXT history, and that DIY knows one day they're going to have to fight them. DIY promised that we could trust them. They weren't there to cause any problems. We later saw Josh Briggs confront Fraxium, telling them they got next. Out the Mud interrupted, saying they were talking to the wrong ones because they were going to be champion. They promised to drag the faces through the mud whenever they fight, and it resulted in a brawl. In no way does Briggs' team deserve a title match when they haven't even had a regular match on television. They've been teaming since November and only fought in the Battle Royal. That's it. Why, in what world do they believe they're deserving of a tag team title match when they haven't won a regular match? Now, it doesn't seem like this is going to be that much of an issue because they did this segment before the title match, which gave away the outcome, even though it was predictable anyway. You had a feeling that Briggs was going to wind up fighting OTM, and then whether they win or lose, they could potentially get a title match after that. But this was really odd segment scheduling. This should have happened after the tag team title match, leading to a brawl with a team that's injured and beaten and wants to get some revenge and get a victory. So, I mean, they got to figure that out. This was really stupid the way it was done. Tag team championship, Fraxium defending against OTM. Booker T wondered at the bell why Mike Rome didn't call them Fraxium when that has never been their official tag team name. It just reminded me how crazy it is that WWE does not name their tag teams, at least not all of them. They hate giving official names to teams, and they hate giving names to finishers, even though fans love those things. Just, it's not that hard. And they do this even when teams hold titles for hundreds of days. Nathan Frazier and Axiom have been champions for like 300 days. Everyone in the world calls them Fraxium, except WWE. I digress. Nathan Frazier had a Batman-style face mask, some nice counters between Axiom and Lucian Price. Nathan Frazier then hit a standing shooting star press, but missed a Phoenix splash on Bronco Nima. OTM came back with a full release toss turnover suplex. Fraxium hit a missile dropkick high-low, but OTM powered out of simultaneous submissions. Price hit a Uranagi of Frazier into Axiom while holding both men in his arms. I love when guys do that. Fraxium combined for a top rope frog splash of Price through the announce table and an avalanche Spanish fly by Fraxium on Nima, plus golden ratio to retain the title. Obviously, the Spanish fly was not by both of them. It was just by Axiom. I misspoke. These guys got like a 4-star match out of a couple neophytes with hardly any experience. No slight to OTM. They wrestled their best match since starting in WWE at the Performance Center. But Fraxium is operating at an insane level right now. They carried these guys to a tremendous main event match that only cemented their place as the best tag team in the world, spanning 2024 now into 2025. DIY, to their credit, they watched all of this from the crow's nest, never got involved. At the same time, nothing came of it. So I'm not totally sure what the booking is going to be there, but seeing Fraxium on the main roster for a title match, that would be incredible, especially given the chaos on SmackDown. That would create a real easy avenue for them to get an excused type of loss. Let's move to the women's tag team division. We had Unholy Union against the Meta Girls for a number one contendership for the women's tag team titles. Nice to see myriad tandem moves from both teams. Lash Legend got double teamed for a while. When she put Jakara Jackson on her shoulders, Unholy Union smartly chopped out her legs and poured on the offense. Lash beasted with a flapjack and a chokeslam before the girls did their shoulder stand crossbody, which, by the way, just does not work inside of the ring. Takes way too long to set up. Alba Fire landed a Swanton Bomb backstabber combo for a broken fall. Jakara hit an inverted X Factor with Lash tagging in blind during a Gory Bomb setup that was perfectly countered into a roll with a wheelbarrow cutter, allowing the Meta Girls to win. I wish the crowd was hotter throughout because all four of them worked real hard. I loved the actual tag team offense going both ways. It was particularly nice to see Unholy Union get so much time to shine in the ring, just given how they've been regulated to barely wrestling on the main roster. The winning side was not a surprise. It should be fun to see them rematch with Bianca Belair alongside Naomi this time. The finish was the best part of the match. Super smooth, smart, inventive, really solid stuff all around here. And by the way, talking about Fraxium not having an official name, Unholy Union is not their official name. They call them Alba Fire and Isla Dawn and Unholy Union. I presume that is a trademark issue because that's an actual phrase as opposed to Fraxium, which is made up, but another team that should be officially named. Dion Lennox stopped Oba walking by. He congratulated him on winning the title. He promised to fight him for it one day. Femi seemed to respect his gumption. In the same segment, Roxy and HBK were speaking in the background. Sean Spears was then talking to Adriana Rizzo, who shot him down with Izzy Dame coming in to get her back, shooing Spears away, saying they're now even, because don't forget, D'Angelo has continuously had Dame's back. Then we saw Ashanti the Adonis macking on Carmen Petrovic. He said he wanted to make it an official thing in 2025, so she pulled him in for a kiss. This was a random amalgamation of people and stories all thrown together into one quick segment. It's also what makes NXT special, different, and fun. Look how much got accomplished in 60 seconds, advancing characters and storylines. Nothing too deep, but just enough to move us on to next week. And lastly, Lexis King and Ava admired that his name was being screwed onto the Heritage Cup backstage. Charlie Dempsey came by to give props. Ren Sinclair suggested the low blow was purposeful and not an accident. She started chanting rematch, which was apparently all Ava needed to grant one. Then we saw D'Angelo and Holland brawl into the parking lot. Do we really need to see this match a fourth time overall? I'm talking about King and Dempsey, and a third time in the last 6 weeks or so. Is Dempsey really going to win this thing back? Everyone involved here, they're all doing great work, but this is really starting to lose my interest. Does no one else want this damn cup? Can we not get a couple other challengers in between King and Dempsey fighting again? There is a such thing as too much of a good thing. I'm not saying all their matches have been incredible, but they have been entertaining. At this point, though, it's really starting to get long in the tooth, and they need to figure out what the end of this storyline is. So that wraps up NXT, another entertaining 2-hour show, as it usually is. A lot of development for next week. I believe they're going to Atlanta at the end of the month. Of course, NXT Vengeance Day in Washington, D.C. about a month from now. So things continue to progress well for NXT. It did a fantastic rating on Tuesday for the second week in a row. We're going to go ahead and save all ratings talk for next week. We'll look at everything in more of a general sense because we're going to have 3 weeks of NXT, 3 weeks of AEW. It'll give us a nice spread. Maybe we can even average them out and see how both shows have done over that period of time. So allow us to move from that into AEW. And since we are covering 2 weeks of AEW TV all here in one segment, we're obviously going to go much shorter on match breakdowns and stick primarily to storylines. Also going to forgo any relevancy calculations, as I frankly just did not want to be bothered doing it. But I will say, just observing the 8 hours of show and putting the notes down that I did, it felt like most matches actually had a reason for happening. So if I had to guess, I would assume they exceeded that 66% threshold that we always talk about. One note off the top is that for this week's Dynamite, which was subtitled Maximum Carnage, AEW presented it off the top of the show as a pay-per-view-like episode. I found that unnecessary, just given how lackluster the card was and the fact that they were working in front of like 1,500 fans. And I am not hating on them for booking a smaller venue with smaller attendance. That's fine. I've been a proponent of them doing that over the last couple of months. I just wouldn't sell it as that kind of card in front of a crowd like that. So as mentioned, we're primarily going to go through this with storylines in front. So just stick with me as we break this all down, but we're going to go storyline by storyline, segment by segment, all the way through 2 weeks of AEW television. On Collision 2 weeks ago, Jon Moxley put over FTR as two tough sons of bitches, saying he's appreciated their old school mentality, but they crossed the line and created a mess by involving Adam Copeland. Then he put over Cope as an innovator and a legend, but called him a frontrunner. He basically told the trio that Death Riders are hell on earth and they won't find anything good messing with them. It was actually one of Mox's better promos, despite, again, somewhat being word salad. Later on this show, we saw a clip of Darby Allin being thrown down the stairs weeks ago. This is because Darby is currently out of AEW so he can climb Mount Everest. And they played this clip, I believe, on all 4 episodes I watched over the 2 weeks. And yes, Darby Allin, the guy who is dead center in the middle of this Death Riders angle, the guy who is expected to ultimately dethrone Mox, he will be gone for months climbing a mountain. Now, he's allowed to do whatever he wants, obviously. And Tony Khan is clearly letting him do whatever he wants. But jamming Darby into every part of this Mox story, knowing you're going to write him off for such an extended stretch, is wildly poor creative, especially when the guy taking a tumble down the stairs didn't even look that bad compared to some of the crazy ass shit he's done previously. If you want to write him off, maybe literally hit him with a car or have him get bloodied or asphyxiated to something, given all the stuff that Mox and his crew have done, where he needs to legitimately be out for a couple months to recover. Rolling somewhat safely, and I know it's very tough to safely roll downstairs, but people do it. Rolling safely down a flight of stairs and then just landing at the bottom and not selling anything, it doesn't tell me you need to miss weeks, or I should say, months of action. Even later on this collision, Copeland explained that he had FTR's back because they're his friends and they needed his help. He also told Mox that he wants to add a dozenth world championship to his resume. Chris Jericho interrupted, all angry about being overlooked, reminding he's also become a champion since Copeland left. Copeland put him over. He said he even liked him. Jericho then dissed him and called him injury prone. So Copeland said, actually, Jericho, you're an asshole. Mini pop from me seeing them face to face after all these years, but this was disjointed as hell. On that same collision, Rated FTR beat the Learning Tree. There was a backstage segment with FTR, the Rock and Roll Express, and the Outrunners that was fun and gimmicky if you're into that stuff. The Faces hit Power and Glory with an added Copeland elbow drop for a Big Bill kickout. Jericho and Dax Harwood then went face-to-face while delivering sharpshooters. The end of this match was absurd. Jericho could barely go through his moves. Chris landed on his face trying a lion salt, and then he ate Shatter Machine and a spear. Mox interrupted the start of an in-ring promo by showing the Rock and Roll Express duct taped to some metal box. Outrunners saved, only to get hit with crowbars or something, and then Death Riders all ran away, and Rated FTR helped the Legends out of their handcuffs.
What is going on?
On that same episode of Collision, we saw footage of Hangman Page arguing with Christopher Daniels from Dynamite 3 weeks ago. Page said CD was an old man clinging on to a sport that left him behind a long time ago, and he should have fully retired years ago. Then Hangman slapped him across the face, leading to a tackle and an attack. Daniels somehow bladed in the middle of his forehead, despite being slapped in the bottom part of his face. And I just kept thinking, why the hell are these two guys feuding in 2025? Also on that collision, Jarrett beat Aaron Solo in 90 seconds. I know the story they're telling is about Jarrett like challenging for the title in 2025, and he needs to build up his resume. He did not need to start at the absolute bottom. On Dynamite last week, there was a casino gauntlet to determine a number one contender. It lasted 27 minutes. Keep that number in mind. White and Hangman Page started with Adam Cole, Daniel Garcia, Jeff Jarrett, Kyle O'Reilly, Lance Archer, Ricochet, Roderick Strong, and Wheeler Yuta all involved. So At the maximum, it was 10 men, with Undisputed Kingdom somehow getting all 3 of its singles involved. Yuta stayed, preventing White from winning throughout the entire match. The end was Hobbs catching O'Reilly for a spinebuster, getting the 1-2-3. It was probably the worst of the Casino Gauntlet matches, but still good. 3.5 stars and a B. Perfectly fine, entertaining. It didn't really succeed in making Hobbs look like a number 1 contender, but it at least created a reason to give him a random opportunity against Mox. Hobbs got a promo after the bell saying Mox brought him to AEW, but now he's going to make him his little bitch. He said this right to Renee's face, which was kind of fun, but I'd have preferred something a little bit more intense and involved to make me actually give a shit about this guy, just given Hobbs rarely gets any mic time. Now, to be fair, Hobbs got an extended tape promo on the following Collision that accomplished all of that. The gist was that he's been shot, homeless, etc., so nothing Mox can do to him is that worrisome compared to all the trials and tribulations he's already gone through. He also promised to make Mox his bitch again, which, I mean, okay, I could really do without that, but it may have been the best promo of Hobbs' entire AEW career. After the Casino Gauntlet match, which Jarrett had to leave for a bit due to injury, he came back for an interview, only to get interrupted by MJF. Max ran down the losers who have beat up Jarrett of late before sarcastically putting over Double J and informing fans that his new contract is actually only 1 year in length, so his time is limited. MJF offered his help in becoming AEW champion so long as he becomes the number 1 contender once Jarrett wins. Double J called Max a one-hit wonder as champion and chided him for scheming rather than actually entering the gauntlet and trying to win an opportunity. By the way, great point, Double J.
Thank you!
He ultimately refused Max's help and called him an entitled prick. This might have been the most enjoyable MJF segment since he's returned, and what actually frustrated me is that they aren't working together, because that dynamic would have been fun, unique, and potentially interesting long-term. I did think this was leading to Jarrett being like, you know what, you're an asshole, but I've been an asshole too, and I was an asshole when I was on top of this business. Let's do it. Instead, I presume it's going to be a short feud that MJF wins, and that's that. And to that end, MJF's general concept here was flawed. Why would he waste months helping Jarrett when he can just earn a shot himself? Does the guy with the AEW tattoo really not want to buck up against Mox? Does he not want to help the company that he has tatted on his body succeed? That's kind of flummoxing. Now, before we continue with all the Mox and Cope stuff, MJF and Jarrett got another similar segment this week on Dynamite. It started with the same assertions as the last one. MJF wore aviator sunglasses, I guess, to look cool. He told fans that Double J's legacy is being the last thing fans see before their favorite wrestling company dies. Wouldn't that apply to him being part of AEW's main event scene right now? By the way, TNA is still around. I digress. MJF alluded to Jarrett's alcoholism. He insulted a fan, calling her a fat skank. He called Karen a MILF. He referred to her being with Kurt Angle. I think he called her a call girl as well. Jarrett basically said MJF was running his old playbook, except doing it worse. He said MJF's mom was a call girl. Sorry, that was the call girl. And his dad was an ambulance chaser. And his mom made his dad pay even when he got her pregnant. Then he called MJF's girlfriend Alicia a Canadian call girl and basically a slut, saying she slept with 10 men.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Jarrett said Max is drowning in his own shit and called him a scared little boy. Cut to MJF, and I shit you not, either his spray tan or his hair dye was dripping down his head. I think it was a spray tan. It was wild to look at. MJF said he made himself a top guy and didn't need to create his own company or have his daddy book him that way. MJF complained about being on top and having it stolen from him, saying he now needed to win the title and wouldn't wait in line for Double J, who no one gives a shit about. Then, if that's the case, shouldn't Max have entered the gauntlet? MJF then said Jarrett being best friends with Owen Hart doesn't mean he's owed a grand finale. He called Jarrett a leech, riding the coattails of his dead friend. Did Martha Hart approve these lines? Because she has to approve everything questionable in AEW. So did she approve the mentions of her dead husband? Jarrett unloaded on him with punches. Karen ran down and separated them. So MJF grabbed her as a shield and then ran away. Holy shit. How do we even discuss this segment? This was MJF at his edgelordiest. One line after another. This shit from him is so 4 to 5 years ago. MJF is way too talented in order to not have evolved his gimmick in all this time. We saw him take significant steps forward working with Adam Cole in the early part of that storyline. And ever since he left and he came back, it has been trite, eye-roll inducing nonsense. And for Jarrett to need to, I guess, stoop to that level just to return fire equally with all that low-hanging fruit, that made for such a try-hard segment. It really wound up difficult to watch. I mean, the immense amount of misogyny displayed here, from referring to a fan as a skank to talking about their significant others basically being whores. Who even uses the term call girl in 2025 anyway? If you're going to be an asshole misogynist, and I guess a babyface misogynist also, say what you mean. Call them whores, because that's what you effing mean. That's what Tony Khan, by the way, is allowing on his TV show immediately before a women's match. Mind you, of course, the only women's match on the show and the only segment that featured women in any meaningful way. But a women's match and this segment got equal time. I was originally going to say that this probably won't wind up a 0.0 award nominee at year's end, but the more I think and talk about it and get wound up, yeah, I think it might. This better be one of the worst segments of 2025, or else AEW is really in the shit in the forthcoming months. On Collision, I thought it started clunky. The storyline might have some legs to it, make both their characters interesting. 15 minutes later on Dynamite, I am all the way out on this. All the way.
Off is a direction you can fuck.
Dustin Rhodes later got Jarrett's back during a backstage interview, saying MJF's a piece of crap and he's rooting for Double J to become world champion once more. Dustin said they were the last of their kind, which is not totally untrue when you consider their age and background. But did I need this on my TV? Not really. They are sure putting a lot on Jarrett winning this title when A, he absolutely should not. B, Christian Cage is literally holding a cash-in contract. And C, there's about a dozen other people who should be winning this instead of him, including people who have already been champion. By the way, if you put together all of this with the Hurt Syndicate stuff, which we'll talk about later, AEW had a string of like 6 different 50-year-olds on screen inside of 40 minutes, all of them wrestlers. And that's not even counting Copeland and Jericho appearing in the show. Copeland, in a promo on Dynamite 2 weeks ago, denied Mox's assertion that others who want to be champion in AEW are afraid of the grind. Just ask Will Ospreay. He said he's a different animal than anyone else coming back from a broken neck and broken ankles to continue wrestling and win matches. The idea being that Mox can't do anything to Copeland that compares to what he's already experienced, which, by the way, is exactly what Powerhouse Hobbs said. Death Riders came out to confront. FTR joined to even the sides. Cope hesitated to hit Marina Shafir, leading Pac to drill him with the briefcase. Hey, look at that. Pac's back from a weeks-long unexplained absence. Mox then choked out Copeland and went to asphyxiate him with a plastic bag when Hobbs strolled down and the heels ran away. Why are none of these faces prepared for Marina? We've seen Willow Nightingale twice, both times randomly go at her. They haven't had a match or promos of any kind, no meaningful confrontation, no other woman backstage seems to give a single shit about AEW. If this is leading to Beth Phoenix showing up in AEW to combat Marina, I'm not sure I'll be able to stand that. Copeland's promo was solid. It was logical as well. The rest of this was weak. On Collision this week, Copeland beat Big Bill in 13 plus minutes. He hit the Impaler DDT and a spear, but Big Bill kicked out for a false finish. Yes, Big effing Bill kicked out of an Impaler DDT and a spear. No delay in the cover, nothing like that. This is a thing that actually happened. So Copeland, the babyface, pulled the referee aside, low-blowed Bill, speared him, did hammer elbows like Mox, and won with a chokehold, also like Mox. So he straight up cheated to beat Bill, who's never won anything in AEW. Then all 6 brawled and got separated. I presume that breakdown was enough for you to understand my opinion on this. On Collision, Jericho beat Hardwood in 15 minutes. This was actually the main event. The ring announce was Dax the Axe without his last name. Is Wheeler going to be called like Cash the Trigger going forward or something like that? What are we doing here? More importantly, This is an early but strong contender for worst match of the year. Certainly the worst so far in 2025. Here's how it ended. Jericho missed a belt shot, then waved his hand at the referee, who sold it like an eye poke. Dax did a flying headbutt that was supposed to land on the belt, but he didn't wait for Chris to lift the belt and move it to the other side of his body, so he landed a regular headbutt, but sold it as if he got hit by the belt. Jericho then did a regular belt shot for a false finish, a belt shot to the head, false finish. Then he won with the Judas effect. It was bad besides this, but the finish was a disaster. And the post-match was just as eye-rolling because Learning Tree, Rated FTR, Death Riders, and Outrunners all ran out for a brawl that literally nobody asked to see. It ended with a Mox DDT of Copeland and a Hobbs save from a concerto. Hobbs no-sold a chair shot, and Mox again ran behind Shafir. White already hit her with Blade Runner. Why can't any other man attack her at this juncture if no women are going to? The greatest success here was Hobbs looking powerful, but really that's it. On Dynamite, a 12-man tag team match involving all of these guys was announced for Collision this coming Saturday. Just what fans want. More Learning Tree with the Death Riders. This was done through an unfunny New York Minute update on Dynamite. We later got a short rated FTR video package that included press conference clips of them basically repeating that they're all best friends. It was really odd. On Collision, Hangman cut a passionate backstage promo about being embarrassed, how he allowed his family to be put in danger last year. He said his coping mechanism to ensure he did not become a husk of a man was to destroy Swerve and his house. If you paused it right there, it was a great freaking promo. And then he continued. While he was okay with humoring CD's advice, he said Daniels crossed the line laying hands on him, and therefore he's going to kill him in a Texas death match. This went from a couple guys conversing backstage to a Texas death match. Not even held in Texas, but in Cincinnati. In fact, I think only one of Hangman's Texas death matches have actually been held in Texas. By the way, this guy famously lives in Virginia. Make it make sense. CD later responded by recounting his career, saying he's a wrestler again. This is a totally unnecessary and unrealistic, even in kayfabe, escalation of a mini feud just to get a stipulation in hopes of drawing viewers. Didn't want to see Hangman CD in the first place. This is certainly not helping in any meaningful way. I'm sure it's going to be violent. There will be bloodletting and shit like that. But man, who cares about Hangman and Daniels in 2025? Can you imagine WWE booking Drew McIntyre and Adam Pearce in a match? I mean, at least if they did that, fans would be interested because they actually care about Pearce. He's a regular on-screen character. He emotes all the time. And like, there's a storyline where you could say they hate each other and therefore it's coming to this. It would still be a terrible match. You could at least buy it. But could you imagine WWE not just booking that match on TV? Because that's okay if they did that. But saying, you know what? First match between you guys, Hell in a Cell. That's the equivalent of this. This is exactly what CM Punk was talking about, by the way, about not overbooking stipulations the first time that you fight. He was talking about it with the Drew McIntyre feud. Someone asked him, hey, are you guys going to do a Hell in a Cell match? He's like, they haven't even fought yet. They ended up having a match, then they did a strap match, then they progressed to Hell in a Cell. Jumping from we're friends, but I disagree with you, to I'm going to kill you in a Texas death match in Cincinnati, it's just ridiculous. On Collision this week, Pac beat Commander in 8 minutes with the Brutalizer. Immediately after, Yuta and Claudio Castagnoli beat the Outrunners in 12 minutes. Cool gut-wrench avalanche suplex from Claudio, plus a rocket launcher with Wheeler for the win. This was 25 minutes of completely missable, irrelevant wrestling. 1/8 of AEW TV for the entire week was spent on this. On Dynamite this week, the main event, Mox against Hobbs for the AEW Championship. Mox made his entrance from outside the arena in the snow, and given this was in Cincinnati, he got a great reception. Death Riders surrounded before the match. The referee rang the bell with Mox completely outside the ring. Mox got bloodied around his left ear, the side of his head. Might have been a hard way. Maybe he got an earring ripped out or something, but it was disgusting the way it splattered across the ring, and it just kept coming. It never stopped. Shafir hit Hobbs with the briefcase, leading to a roll-up and a kick-out. Paradigm Shift was a false finish. so Mox ultimately won with the Bulldog choke. Mox also no-sold some major moves in this match, like a spinebuster and avalanche-style power slam, just got right back up, which was really weak. Death Riders immediately attacked Hobbs and his braced knee with a chair, even stomping one wrapped around his leg. Rated FTR chased the heels away. Somehow, they weren't able to get out there right away, despite a really slow 5-minute attack. This is the same story that we've told before. The crowd was hot for a Mox match, or something involving all of these guys, and then it completely died in the post-match. Why babyfaces are not backstage on the ready when this group is out there makes no sense. They should be ready to pounce the second the match ends or the second an attack starts. AEW has to have the dumbest group of babyfaces that has ever existed in professional wrestling. This is an issue every single week. It's the same thing over and over.
It's the same thing over and over and over. It's like missionary position every single night. In the tribal chief, the head of the table, we're not interested in that. No.
This Mox reign and the storytelling surrounding it is just absolutely exhausting. One of the best matches of Hobbs' career ended with a wet fart and then repetitive booking that has lasted the entirety of Mox's latest run as champion. By the way, is he going to sell this knee? Did they write him off of television coming off his best promo and one of his best matches? How do you not capitalize on this guy who's hot all of a sudden? Blackpool Combat Club was at least interesting. This is like that, but convoluted and extra violent for no good reason. Also, this whole concept of Mox holding the title hostage is ridiculous. He's not displaying it, but he's constantly defending it, and he's accepting number one contenders. It's a title run. They're just not showing the title. It's really the only difference. This thing is not drawing. It's not getting anyone over. It's just not working.
0.0.
On Collision 2 weeks ago, Brian Cage beat Dante Martin Commander and the Beast Mortos in a $100,000 high-speed collision match. I believe I tweeted about this when it was announced. I love the idea of money being involved in wrestling. Generally when it comes to fines and such, but okay, a match burst is cool too. But why exactly was this match with these guys worth $100,000? It featured 4 dudes who as singles lose and lose and lose. If this shitty foursome is worth $100,000, what does the winner of like Swerve Strickland versus Bobby Lashley get? $1 million? Why don't we know? Why was money only mentioned in this match and not others? What is being paid for exactly? They're all doing their jobs. If money is not on the line in the other matches, and let's say you're Swerve, wouldn't you be angry that you're wrestling for free while others have a chance to win a big time cash prize in a match you could easily emerge from if given the opportunity? Maybe if there was like a crazy hardcore stipulation where the wrestlers are being paid to put their health in danger, I could buy something like that. But the concept behind this was just absurd if you even try to apply a shred of logic to it.
It's about nothing.
No story?
No, forget the story.
You gotta have a story.
Who says you gotta have a story?
On Dynamite 2 weeks ago, Will Ospreay beat Buddy Matthews in 13 minutes. This match was made for yours truly. Buddy finally getting a chance to show what he can do against a featured player. Ospreay did an Oz cutter off the barricade, another typical style inside, plus a standing hidden blade for a false finish. Matthews came back with an inverted go to sleep and the stomp. Will then countered Buddy into Styles Clash for a false finish, landing a hidden blade as Matthews just stared at him, waiting for it to get the win. I don't mind that kind of ending when you're doing like a 30-minute match or some epic long feud. It felt a little bit overdone as the finish for this. Ospreay put Matthews over after the bell, but he actually slipped and he called him Buddy Murphy, which was hysterical. Will said he admired Buddy for years, but neither he nor Brody King need to be following any leader. He said tag or singles gold is in Matthews' future, and he'll get his back whenever he needs it. Then they shook hands. This match was excellent. 4 stars, A-. It left plenty on the table when it comes to the capabilities of both men. Grading it any higher than that, given it was mostly basic, given their abilities, it would be ridiculous. The post-match promo was in reference to Malachi Black finishing up in AEW, which became a hot topic over the last week. It was really sweet for Ospreay to kind of say that as a person and a character. In reality, House of Black was a great unit, but it was consistently underutilized and forgotten about. Malachi and Buddy in particular. And that was absolutely not Black's fault. Suggesting here that he's an unnecessary part of the group, it's rewriting history. And frankly, it's kind of sliding a guy on his way out of a company. Look at the way Ricochet was written off compared to this. Kind of pathetic. As far as Black goes, there were rumors he wanted out of AEW long ago. Then there were rumors he extended his deal. And despite multiple TV indications he might be on his way out, he would just keep coming back for one-off matches here and there. The latest was a loss to Adam Cole, which was ridiculous just the way it was put together, but it seemed clear that Black was done, and now that appears to be the case. Whether he returns to WWE, it's going to be curious. His wife, Zelina Vega, she's there, not being utilized like she should be. He's only 39, he can still go. I saw an independent match of his recently. He did not put on a lot of miles on his tires in AEW, kind of like Andrade. So I think he could come back. WWE doesn't need him, but I know myself and probably many of you would love to see what he can do on the main roster under Paul Levesque, given the way Shinsuke Nakamura, Andrade, and now even Penta are being presented. He can be that same type of mid-card champion, upper mid-card title challenger who may not win a ton, but can be a valuable asset. Hell, you could even give him a redo in NXT, like Finn Balor got as the Prince years ago. I would love to see him do 6 months in NXT and then get called up to the main roster. Let him win the NXT title, work there, bring him back up, have him be a mid-carder for 2 or 3 years. Could totally see it. We'll find out whether that actually happens. On Dynamite 2 weeks ago, Kenny Omega's return main evented the show. He had a new epic-sounding entrance with fire graphics. I absolutely hated the theme compared to all of his others, but I saw a lot of fans loved it. They said it was similar to some video game. The only one I could maybe piece together was like Final Fantasy. I never played that, but visually it seemed like it might be that. So to each their own, if you liked it. There's no question that his presentation as a big deal, though, was important. AEW needs to, for lack of a better term, create superstars. And Omega is most certainly a superstar. He got a big pop initially that unfortunately commentary kept yapping over. Omega sold the effects and recovery from diverticulitis, saying he tested the theory that he needed wrestling to live in Japan, and his victory there proved that he did need it. Don Callis showed up only to immediately get attacked by Kenny, with Cage and Lance Archer saving. Then Kyle Fletcher attacked as well, with Cage delivering a punch to the abdomen. Ospreay saved with a chair and ultimately stared down Omega without a handshake or really anything much between them. Expected more out of this, just given how impactful Omega's return in Japan was the week prior. Omega immediately feuded with the Callis family here. That is sensible, just given the Elite storyline got canceled. It's a nice way to kind of reintroduce him to AEW, give him some victories, but something still was lacking here. Maybe it's because his issue was with Callis and not any of the guys in the actual family. So they're all just operating as surrogates. But I was hoping for more coming out of this, even if it was still mostly enjoyable from Kenny. Omega coming back should be a huge deal. Here it felt like a big deal, if that makes sense. On Dynamite this week, Omega beat Cage in 12 minutes. It opened the show. Omega got cut early. He was also press slammed into the announce table where Archer and Callis attacked him. Kenny ultimately hit a V-trigger to the back of his head, and he lifted him with the ropes for one winged angel. Cage looked like a juiced Wolverine. Archer and Fletcher attacked because it's an AEW match. Ospreay saved without music. Konosuke Takeshita then came out and brawled with Omega, so Ospreay saved again, but the heels ultimately won. I'm not sure I can remember 2 post-match attacks with the same people in one segment. So we'll presumably get a tag team match here, maybe Omega against Takeshita for the international title down the line. Both of those will be super exciting bookings, especially Omega and Take, but Omega and Ospreay teaming would be crazy. I believe Konosuke has pinned Kenny twice, so Omega possibly taking the title off of him and then maybe meeting Kazuchika Okada in a title versus title match at All In. That would make a ton of sense. They could even merge the international and continental titles into some type of, I don't know, intercontinental title. Just a wild and crazy idea there. In terms of the end of this, are there really no other baby faces back there who want to help the 2 most over guys in the entire company? AEW's faces, not only are they lazy, they're selfish as hell. They also lingered with Omega and Ospreay like rolling around selling the effects of this for a longer stretch of time than like 75% of championship celebrations in the company's history. I thought that was kind of odd. On Collision, Brody King squashed a jobber in 90 seconds with Julia Hart watching. She was dressed up, but not made up like usual. It's going to be hysterical if they remain House of Black without Black. I'm not positive. It looked like Brody may have lost some weight as well. He moved around nicely. Copeland then met them backstage saying he respected them and it's time for King to take the reins. It's really odd how they're referencing Malachi not returning despite not writing him off in any way whatsoever. I understood why Buddy needed Will to put him over because he's basically gotten nothing in his entire AEW tenure. But Brody has been in tournaments. He's been in major matches. He's gotten huge wins over stars like Darby. This felt a lot more forced than the Ospreay one. I'm also realizing now in my breakdown, I should have talked about this like 5 or 10 minutes earlier coming out of the Ospreay and Buddy Matthews match, but alas, we're talking about it now. On Dynamite 2 weeks ago, Mariah May in a dressing room said the women involved in their first ever casino gauntlet would be dancing for her pleasure. Harley Cameron invaded with all of her energy, wanting a non-title match so they can show off their hot girl graps. Harley remains entertaining. This might have been her weakest in a while. Another random match booking. On Collision, May beat Harley in 9 minutes. It went about as you would expect, though Cameron did get some surprising offense in the latter stages. May won with Storm Zero as per usual. Nothing else happened. On Collision 2 weeks ago, Toni Storm beat Deonna Purrazzo in 9 minutes. I spent a lot of time during this match figuring out how to describe Taya Valkyrie's hair color. I wound up with dehydrated urine yellow. Storm won with an inside cradle, which worked in general, but even more so because of the gimmick that she's running. The match surprisingly left a lot to be desired. It's also crazy that Purrazzo came in and was like a main eventer in the women's division, and now she just loses matches on Collision and doesn't mean anything. On Dynamite 2 weeks ago, Chris Statlander beat Storm and Willow Nightingale to earn the number 1 entrant in the Casino Gauntlet. This main evented as a match. There was the Omega segment after it. It went 10 minutes. Zero pre-match conversation or interaction between Stat and Willow, who went from best friends to enemies to Stat turning face for no reason and half apologizing to her, but not totally. And now they're just in matches and operating, and that's it. The match kind of happened in a silo. Stat beat Storm with Wednesday Night Fever rather suddenly. It was solid overall. Storm later cut a promo saying she's clearly not ready, but she'll keep working hard. Remember, this was on Dynamite 2 weeks ago. On Dynamite this week, we had the Casino Gauntlet to determine a number 1 contender for the women. It lasted 13 minutes. It was the shortest of any of these Casino Gauntlet matches by like 5 or 6 minutes, and unlike the others, it only featured 7 women. Former independent star Megan Bain debuted here. She's super talented, and she's been signed, I think, for a couple years, but the crowd understandably had zero reaction to her. She also had, and I mean, let's just be candid, a golden phallus and testicles on her cape. I dare you to watch or find a clip of her entrance and tell me otherwise. May was on commentary for this. She really struggled compared to what Storm has done previously in that role. Other entrants included Harley, Jamie Hayter, Julia Hart, and Willow. Hart missed Harley before Storm pinned her with an inside cradle. 3.5 stars B, really fun match. So Storm now fights May at Grand Slam Australia, coming off of just 1 week ago losing the number 1 spot and saying she's clearly not ready and needs to work hard. But you'll remember that Storm and May at Grand Slam Australia is what we figured was coming months ago. Mariah, rather than reacting in like a meaningful way to her nemesis becoming the number 1 contender for her title, stood up and clapped. The match was entertaining. It was one of the best parts of Dynamite. I was lost at the creative decision having May react that way. I guess the idea is that she's underestimating Toni just given the way that she's been acting, but I would rather her be mad initially than have them do interactions on screen, then Mariah underestimate her. And then it all comes to a climax before their match, presumably with Storm proving she's been acting the entire time, or she somehow gets knocked straight and remembers everything. Speaking of Grand Slam, I have no idea what's going on with this show. It has been a total mess. It got moved from a stadium to an arena in Australia because they couldn't sell tickets, which I imagine has to seriously hurt the prospects of doing the show and the overall profitability, but shit happens. It happened to WWE, erroneously trying to do Money in the Bank in the stadium. They had to move it to an arena, but that wasn't overseas. It also seems, and I cannot confirm this, but it seems like this went from a pay-per-view to a TV and streaming special. It was announced on Dynamite that Grand Slam will air in the Collision time slot on TNT February 15th. The problem with that is that February 15th is NBA All-Star Saturday, which includes the three-point contest, the dunk contest, all that stuff. And that airs on TNT. It's frankly better than the All-Star game itself. Now, this will obviously simulcast on Max, but that means it may air on TBS or True TV head to head with what's going to be a far better rated Warner Brothers Discovery event. It is also airing across from NXT Vengeance Day, and it's going to be a taped show since it's happening halfway around the world. So, like I said, I have absolutely no clue what's going down here. But as a TV special, even if they tape Dynamite on the back end, it really seems like Australian fans are not getting what was originally advertised for them. On Dynamite, Ricochet was announced to the ring with fans asked to show some love for him. He had the gold scissors in his jacket pocket. This whole thing was a gimmick to try to get him Don Callis or Dominic Mysterio-like heat when he lifted the mic but didn't speak. But it was so damn transparent that they were trying to do that. And it doesn't work when you only have 1,500 people in the arena. Again, I'm not shading them for having that many people. I'm just saying this doesn't work with that many people. He delayed long enough where some people ultimately chanted Swerve's house a little bit. All he wound up saying was a picture is worth 1,000 words. He pointed to the big screen, and we saw them bloodied from a couple weeks ago. Swerve's music hit. Prince Nana attacked him from behind with a chair shot. Then Ricochet ran away as Swerve approached the ring. That was the entire segment. What stuck out to me the most is that Ricochet, a bald-headed, oval-shaped man, his head, and I mean this with zero disrespect because I have a round head myself. This man should not be wearing rounded aviator-style eyeglasses. You have to wear a squared frame to offset your face, dude. Again, I am speaking from experience here. The camera got right in his grill for this segment, and he looked like an egghead the entire time. It was totally off-putting. Just don't wear glasses or wear a squared frame. Those are the two options. Again, I deal with this myself. On Collision 2 weeks ago, the TNT title was on the line. Daniel Garcia retained over Mark Briscoe in 18 minutes. Garcia got a rope break after Jay Driller and ultimately snuck by with a jackknife cover. I feel like he wins most matches in that fashion, specifically with the jackknife. It would be nice to let this guy get some definitive victories given he's, the champion. Thought the crowd would be hotter for two popular baby faces. It did amp up when there was a 3-minute announcement, which I've never heard before. I thought they only did that for 2 or 1. On Collision this week, TNT Championship, Garcia retained over Katsuyori Shibata in 11 minutes. Is he just going to defend against all his friends until a heel steps up to him? This was a counter-heavy finish. Shibata slapped the taste out of his mouth. Garcia then counted a ripcord into, you guessed it, a jackknife cover to get the win. Definitely the match of the night. It was the best over the 4 hours of Collision that I watched. Nearly went higher, 3.5 stars and a B. On Collision 2 weeks ago, the tag team titles were on the line. Private Party retained over Action Andretti and Leo Rush in 14 minutes. The match under-delivered given all their skill. It was an escape win for the champions with Andretti's shoulder not even on the mat. This tag team division is in dire straits, but help might be coming. On Dynamite 2 weeks ago, the champions were having a party on the stage when Hurt Syndicate interrupted to toast Private Party with shots. MVP gave the toast. Then Bobby Lashley spoke his second line in AEW, saying they would take the tag team titles. So they poured out the drinks. A truly captivating segment. Hey, at least it would help the tag team division. Later on that show, immediately after, Lashley beat Briscoe in a 9-minute match that followed. Lashley kicked out a Froggy Bow at 1. He had a spear and almighty spinebuster, and then won with Hurt Lock. Party then saved a post-match attack with chairs. Revelatory. On Dynamite this week, Hurt Syndicate beat Briscoe and Private Party in a trios match. A big deal was made about this being MVP's return to the ring. Shelton Benjamin won with a super kick. Not a great match. The point was to show dominance by the actual group. The problem is they destroyed the tag team champions, who have been booked terribly since winning the titles. I certainly hope that the idea is to flip the straps onto Hurt Syndicate as soon as possible would help elevate the entire division potentially and give them some direction. It feels like they've stalled. They handed out the cards. No one actually joined them. Lashley beat Swerve. Now Swerve's fighting with Ricochet. Nothing's really happening with them. On Dynamite this week, Hook beat Christian Cage by disqualification in 12 minutes. There were multiple counters, but once Hook locked in Red Rum, the Patriarchy attacked him, leading to the bell. Taz was about to exit commentary to help prevent usage of chairs when Samoa Joe made his long-awaited return and cleared the house. He hit an awesome power slam. Shibata then just spawned out of nowhere, having no prior impact, hitting a PK to end all of this. Where the hell was Shibata the rest of the time Hook was getting attacked? We anticipated Joe's return in this storyline like a month ago, so it happening here was welcome, especially because the booking of this has otherwise been shit. The trios match is expected now. We'll see if it continues past that. Either way, Joe being back is a massive win for AEW. He adds so much gravitas wherever he's on screen and whenever he gets a mic in his hand. Give this guy one of those myriad titles as soon as possible. Hell, let these guys win the trio straps for all I care. On Collision 2 weeks ago, we saw footage from Dynamite 3 weeks ago of Anthony Bowens denying an interview while Max Caster crowed multiple times about being the best wrestler alive. Bowens circled back and flipped out on him, saying Billy Gunn won't even come around them anymore. This is now in shit or get off the pot territory for me. Split them and have Caster turn heel, whether with Hearn Syndicate or not, or have them come back together with an edge. But the week in, week out of this is grating. Caster has killed his character. On Dynamite, we saw day-in-the-life footage of Mercedes Moné showing her on some show called Sherry. No idea who that is. Then looking at jewelry and doing some training. It accomplished absolutely nothing. She otherwise was not on these shows. And on Dynamite this week, AEW did one of those response promo packages where Undisputed Kingdom, Garcia, and Matt Menard somehow knew what each other was saying despite not speaking live to one another. I thought they had cut those out of the broadcast and were no longer doing that. Apparently not.
No.
By the way, what happened to the actual Kingdom? O'Reilly's with Cole and Strong, so now they're not needed? Are they working Ring of Honor? Are they still part of the group? Really odd stuff. So that wraps up 8 hours of AEW. The Silver King got to watch in pretty much a 48-hour period. Clearly a lot happened. They're building toward Mox and Cope. The Mox-Hobbs interlude worked as a match, struggled, obviously, with the post-match. The MJF and Jarrett stuff was a low point. The women's division, the matches were really good. They're still not getting a lot of time. So despite 2 weeks all at once here, really not that much changed in AEW. So that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back on Tuesday for our next WWE show. And then 1 week from now, same bat time, same bat channel, we will talk NXT, AEW, and unless some other major news story happens, we will cover New Japan, Wrestle Kingdom, and Wrestle Dynasty, some quick hitters from both of those shows. On the way out, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating. On Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. You will get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show. And lastly, please do not forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts every week, usually on Friday. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back on Tuesday talking all things WWE. For Vintage Chris Manini, this is the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.